kids, Kayla here again, and I just love this time of year where it's summer and you can enjoy the outdoors and enjoy playing outside with your friends and family. And there are so many activities you can do during the summer, and one of my favorites is, could you guess it? It's something that families do a lot. A lot of families enjoy it. Oh, I think I heard somebody say it. Camping. Yes, camping. I love camping. It's so much fun. You just get to enjoy the outdoors, sit by a campfire, enjoy nature with your family, just relax. But when you go camping, you kind of have to plan some stuff, don't you? You want to make sure you have enough food. You want to make sure you have enough water and snacks and anything else that you need along with it. But I always like to make sure that you have what I consider a crucial ingredient to the camping list. And that is s'more ingredients. That is a crucial item in my opinion. And what do you need for s'mores? Let me hear you guys say it. Chocolate. Graham crackers. Marshmallows, yes. And what? Yes, the bigger the better. That is so true. It just makes it so gooey and so delicious. And it's just so yummy in the tummy. And you know what the word s'more, you know what there is about there? Guess what? It's like a combination of two words. Some more. So s'more. No wonder we can't have just one, right? Because who eats just one s'more? Everybody has at least 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, however many you can eat, right? They're just so delicious. But it would be pretty disappointing if you went camping and let's say your mom only packed enough s'mores ingredients for just your brother or your sister. What? Not for you? And what if she only packed enough food for one day instead of 3 days? That would just be heartbreaking, wouldn't it? We just always got to make sure we have enough supplies that will last, right? Well, there's one person who is always so good at supplying all our needs, and that is God. He always takes care of us and gives us and takes care of us and gives us exactly what we need and not any more. It is such a blessing from him. And it doesn't matter if it's just you and me, or if it's 10 people, or 50 people, or 5,000 people. And guess what? There's a story in the Bible that talks about how Jesus supplied food for 5,000 people. Can you believe that? That's a lot of people. Let's read the story, shall we? It is from John 6, verse 1 through 14. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed from healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where should we buy the bread for all these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than a half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here's a boy. He's got 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will that go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely, this is the prophet who is to come into the world." Isn't that amazing? That is so neat how God provided so much food for all those people with just a little bit of food. And there was even extra. Who would have thought that would happen, right? God loves us so much, and He is so good. Just as Jesus provided more than enough food for 5,000 people, God will give us more than we ever dreamed of. When we ask for help, God will answer. It may not always come the way that we ask for, but we will see it, that when God blesses, He gives us more than we could ever imagine. He gives us a place to sleep, a place to live, friends to play with, and family who just loves us. And that is what I am so thankful and so grateful that God provides for me and for you. So if you have like a bunch of cool toys and a lot of other fun things, it's a nice to have that, but it's not important, is it? No. We have to remember that what is important, and thank God that He provides us with it, and that He knows, and that we know that He will always take care of us and provide us with just enough of what we need. So now I would like to read to you, boys and girls, a little story called "You Are Mine," and it kind of talks about being thankful for what you have. So Punchinello lived in Wemmixville. Just like other Wemmicks, he was made of wood. Just like the other Wemmicks, he was carved by Eli, the Wemmick maker. And just like the other Wemmicks, he sometimes did silly things. Like the time he began collecting boxes and balls. Things started getting crazy when a Wemmick named Tuck bought a new box. Others had boxes, but Tuck's was a new box. Tuck loved his new box. He thought that was the best box in the village. He thought it was brightly colored, and he was proud of it. Too proud, perhaps. He strutted up and down the street, showing off his box. "Have you seen my new box?" he would ask the Wemmicks he passed on the street. "Would you like to touch my new box?" Tuck marched right up to Punchinello. "Don't you wish you had a new box?" he teased. Punchinello thought Tuck's box was beautiful, and he began to wish for a box of his own. Tuck kept showing off his box, thinking he was better than all the other Wemmicks just because he had a new box. Nip, another Wemmick, disagreed. "My box is just as good as Tuck's," he said, as he showed off his box to Wemmicks on the other side of the street. Nip's box was not new, but it was a bit bigger and a bit brighter and a bit more than Tuck could take. Tuck got very quiet and gave Nip a mad look. Then he had an idea. He stepped into a store and bought a ball. Now he had more things than Nip. He had a box and a ball. Nip frowned at Tuck's ball. Nip could do better than that. He bought 2 balls. With a smile on his face, 2 balls and a box in his hand, he marched over to Tuck and smirked. "Now I have more than you." Before he knew it, Tuck was in the store buying another box. Then Nip ran to buy another ball. Then Tuck bought a ball, and Nip bought a box. Ball, box, ball, box. Tuck, Nip, Nip, Tuck. On and on it went. Someone could have stopped the whole mess right there. In fact, that's what the mayor tried to do. "You two are being silly," he said to Nip and Tuck. "Why? Who cares who has the most toys?" "You're just jealous," they replied, "because you don't have any." "Jealous? Of you? Ha!" But within a few moments, the mayor was in the store buying an armful of boxes and balls. Of course, Punchinello didn't want to be called a poor Wemmick, so he decided to get as many boxes and balls as he could. He searched through his closet and found a little ball. He dug into his pocket and found enough money for one small box. I know what I'll do, he declared. I'll sell my books to get more money to buy more boxes and balls. So he did. He bought a blue and a green box with clouds painted on the sides, but still, he wanted more. I'll work nights to get extra money, he told himself. So he did, and he bought another ball. And since he was working nights, he didn't need his bed, so he decided, I'll sell my bed. And he did just that, so he could buy more balls. Soon Punchinello had an armful, but other Wemmicks had more. Some of them had so many boxes and balls, they actually had trouble walking. It's hard keeping up with all my balls and boxes, they would say, acting like they were complaining, but they really were bragging. Punchinello wanted to be like these Wemmicks, so he sold more stuff, and he worked more hours. His eyes were tired from not getting any sleep. His arms were tired from carrying all his toys. He couldn't remember when he last sat down to rest. And worst of all, his friends couldn't remember when Punchinello last came to play. We haven't seen you for a long time, his friend Lucia said to him one day. Why don't you come and play again? Asked his buddy Splint. Not everyone cared about boxes and balls. Punchinello's friends didn't. But Punchinello cared more about having boxes and balls than he cared about having friends. I've got work to do, he would tell them, and his friends would sigh. Punchinello didn't care. He only cared what the other box and balls people thought, and no matter what he did, he couldn't buy enough things to get their attention. Finally, he had an idea. I will sell my house, he decided. That's crazy, said Lucia. Where will you live? Asked Splint. Punchinello didn't know, but he didn't care. All he could think about was the boxes and balls he would have with all of that money. So he sold his house. He bought boxes and boxes and boxes and balls and more balls. He carried so many toys he couldn't see where he was going. His stack went way above his head. But he didn't mind. So what if his arms ached? So what if he kept walking into walls? So what if he had no friends? He had boxes and balls, and when he passed Wemmicks, they would return and say, wow, he must be a good Wemmick. Punchinello heard that. He couldn't see them, but he heard them, and he felt good. I'm a good Wemmick, he thought. But then somebody changed the rules. It was the mayor's wife. She was very proud of her boxes and balls. She not only had a lot of them, but she also had special kinds of them. She bought them at the fanciest stores with funny names and left the names on the boxes so everyone would see them. She wanted to be the best Wemmick. One day she had an idea. Not only will I have the most, but I will go the highest. So she climbed on top of her boxes and shouted, "Look at me, everyone!" Immediately, all of the box and ball people tried to outdo her. One climbed on a fountain, another on a balcony, and then another onto a roof. It was the mayor who spotted the mountain, however. Behind the village of the Wemmicks was Wemmick's Peak. I'm going to the top of the mountain, he shouted, hoping to get there first. The race was on to see which Wemmick would have the most and climb the highest. Wemmicks loaded with boxes and balls began running up the mountain. It was a crazy, crazy race. Since the wooden people couldn't see where they were going, they bumped into each other. Since they were exhausted, they fell over their own feet. Since the trail was narrow, some fell down the side of it, but they kept going. Bringing up the rear was Punchinello. He was having a hard climb, harder than the rest. After all, he'd only been a good Wemmick for a short time. He wasn't used to carrying so many boxes and balls, but he was determined. He kept putting one little wooden foot ahead of the other. But since he couldn't see, he didn't know he was on the side of the trail. And since he couldn't see, he didn't know that he had left the trail. All he knew was that all of a sudden, he was all alone. I must be ahead of everyone else, he thought to himself. And so he kept climbing up and up and up. I must be very near to the top. I'm such a good woman. I'll be the highest with the most. At about that time, Punchinello's foot caught the edge of something. He tried to keep his balance. His toys swayed to the right, then they swayed to the left. He leaned back, then forward, but he couldn't stop. He was going to fall. He didn't know, however, that he walked up the trail to Eli's house. He tripped on the step of the porch and tumbled through the front door of Eli's workshop. When Punchinello realized where he was embarrassed. For a long time, he stayed face down on the floor, surrounded by his boxes and balls. One of the balls rolled across the floor and stopped at Eli's workbench. That's when the wood carver turned around. Punchinello! Eli's voice was calm and deep and kind. The Wemmick still didn't move. He could feel his wooden face turning bright red. Looks like you've been carrying a big load. The weary Wemmick climbed to his knees, but kept his head low. These are my boxes and balls, he said quietly. Do you play with the boxes and balls? Asked Eli. Punchinello shook his head. Do you like boxes and balls? I like the way they make me feel. And how do they make you feel? Important, Punchinello answered, still with a small voice. Eli observed. So you've been thinking like the other Wemmicks. You've been thinking that the more you have, the better you are, and the happier you'll be. I suppose so. Come here, Punchinello. I want to show you something. Punchinello lifted his wooden head and looked at Eli for the first time. He was relieved to see that the Wemmick maker wasn't angry. Punchinello followed Eli over to the window. Look at them, Eli said. Punchinello looked out the window at the swarm of Wemmicks still climbing the mountain. They were tumbling, stumbling, fighting each other, even elbowing each other to get ahead. Do they look happy? Eli asked. Punchinello just shook his head. Do they look important? Not at all, Punchinello said. Noticing the mayor and his wife, the mayor was on the ground, and she was stepping on his back. She had a box on her head and had a ball in his mouth. Do you think I created Wemmicks to act that way? Asked Eli. Nope. Punchinello felt a big hand on his shoulder. Do you know how much your boxes and balls cost you? My books and bed, my money and my house. My little friend, they cost you much more than that. Punchinello was trying to remember what else he sold. When Eli continued, they cost you happiness. You haven't been happy, have you? Punchinello paused. Nope. They cost you friends, and most of all, they cost you trust. You didn't trust me to make you happy. You trusted these boxes and balls. Punchinello looked at the pile of toys. All of a sudden, they didn't seem so valuable. I kind of messed up. That's okay, Eli replied. You're still special. Punchinello ducked his head and smiled. You're special, not because of what you have. You're special because of who you are. You are mine, and I love you. Don't forget that, little friend. I won't, Punchinello smiled. Then he paused and asked Eli, Yes? What should I do with these boxes and balls? Perhaps you should give them to someone who really needs them. Punchinello turned to leave, but stopped again. Eli? Yes? I don't have a place to sleep. Eli smiled and offered, Would you like to sleep here tonight? I sure would. I'm very tired. And so that night, Punchinello slept on a bed of wooden shavings. He slept well. It felt good to be in the house of his maker. So thanks for joining me, boys and girls. And I hope you remember that God loves us and He will supply us with anything and everything we need. See you next time. Bye.